There is a quiet truth about children who grow up in neglect. They often become adults who doubt their own worth, who move through life feeling like an intrusion in someone else's world. They walk into a room and immediately feel the need to shrink, to soften, to quiet themselves so no one grows uncomfortable. They enter relationships with the fear that their feelings are too much. And when they achieve something beautiful, they don't dare celebrate. They simply wait in silence for the moment it goes unnoticed, as if invisibility has always been their most natural state. None of this happens because they lack value or talent, but because the foundation of their self-awareness was built on silence. Psychologists call it internalized neglect, a pattern where the brain slowly learns to accept being overlooked as normal. When a child is forgotten long enough, their mind records a single message. Having needs is trouble, emotions are burdens, and silence is safety. So they learn to stop asking, to swallow the questions no one answers, to stitch their wounds shut with a quiet smile. You've seen a child like that before, standing in a crowded room, gently tugging a parent's sleeve while no one turns around. They don't cry, they don't speak. They just wait, as if waiting is the only way they know how to exist. You can find that child on a playground, in a classroom, or buried somewhere in your own memory. Children like that don't grow up on laughter. They grow up on the silence between other people's sentences. They become calm adults, good listeners, the kind who make others feel comfortable. But inside them lies a still, untouched space that never received a name, a small part of the soul that is still sitting in that old corner of the room, waiting for a gentle voice to say, "Come here, I'm listening." And perhaps the deepest wound is not being forgotten by others, but slowly learning to forget yourself. When you stop seeking, stop asking, stop wanting anything at all, and simply exist so no one has to worry. You call it maturity or being considerate, but in truth, it is just another shape of loneliness. And somewhere within you, a small, fragile, stubborn part is still hoping someone will turn back, place a hand on your shoulder, and say, "I see you." Some adults walk into a room and instinctively look for the smallest corner to stand in. They smile politely, nod just enough, but inside them rises a quiet, familiar fear, the fear of being seen. When others talk, they listen attentively, nodding along, replying with a few brief words, as if their existence should always remain subtle, never taking up too much space. Even when they have something to say, they swallow it, waiting for the right moment, which never comes. And slowly, they begin to believe that silence is simply their personality, when in truth, it is a survival mechanism. You can recognize them at gatherings, in meetings, or even in your own reflection each morning. They are the ones afraid of being a burden, afraid of being misunderstood, afraid that their emotions might exhaust someone else. They are more accustomed to observing than being observed, more practiced at listening than being heard. When someone compliments them, they grow uneasy. When someone offers affection, they doubt it. And when asked, "Are you okay?" they smile and say yes, even as an unnamed emptiness echoes within. What they do not realize is that this practiced "I'm fine" comes from a memory buried so deeply beneath the years. The memory of a child who once waited for a glance, a call, a gentle gesture to confirm their existence. But the glance never came. The call never sounded. The hand was never offered. And when that happens long enough, the child learns that silence is safety. It learns to retreat before it can be abandoned, to need no one so that no one can hurt it, to shrink itself to fit the small space the world has given. That child grows up, carrying disappearance like a habit. It can laugh, succeed, appear strong, yet somewhere within, it is still waiting for someone to turn back and say, "I see you." This silent waiting appears like a small fracture in every relationship, in every seemingly ordinary moment. It keeps them from asking for too much, from trusting fully, and, perhaps most painfully, from believing they deserve anything at all. Because when you are raised in silence, you carry it with you forever, like a second skin, thin enough that no one notices, yet thick enough to muffle every feeling of belonging. And sometimes all you really want is for someone to place a gentle hand on your shoulder, no words, no explanations, just to remind you that you are here and you deserve to be seen. From a psychological perspective, the belief that one is not worth noticing does not appear out of nowhere. It is planted early, in the years when the brain is still learning how to interpret the world. Psychologists call this the internalized neglect schema, a psychological blueprint formed when a child is ignored often enough to believe that silence is safety. Every time a child calls out and no one responds, the brain records a small imprint. Every time it reaches out and is overlooked, the nervous system stores another message. Connection is dangerous. And through hundreds, thousands of such moments, its emotional system learns a single strategy. It doesn't need anyone. According to John Bowlby's attachment theory, every child is born with an instinct to seek presence. When caregivers respond consistently, the child develops a sense of safety, the foundation for confidence and the capacity to love. But when responses are delayed, inconsistent, or, worst of all, never come, the child changes its strategy. Instead of waiting, it withdraws. Instead of trusting, it becomes vigilant. The brain interprets neglect as a threat, triggering a stress response. Cortisol, the hormone of fear, surges through the body, making that little heartbeat faster even as the face remains calm. This is the first form of survival, pretending to be peaceful in an environment that feels unsafe. The frightening truth is that this response does not disappear with age. It simply evolves. The adult you, in moments of being ignored, feels a very old ache rushing back, pain not caused by the present, but by childhood memories reawakening. This is why a single unanswered message, a distracted glance, or an accidental silence can make your chest tighten. You are not weak. It is the child brain within you whispering, "It's happening again." Neglect is not always intentional. Sometimes it comes from exhausted parents, from families overwhelmed by survival, from caregivers who themselves were once neglected. But no matter the cause, the impact on the child's mind is the same: a sense of invisibility. A child who grows up without being reflected in a loving gaze never learns the shape of its own self. It learns to see itself through others' eyes, and when those eyes are absent, the self feels hollow. From that emptiness grows a dangerous confusion. If no one notices me, it must mean I'm not good enough. This belief roots itself so deeply that even in adulthood, even when you are competent, kind, accomplished, it whispers, "You don't matter." The truth is, no child ever learns not to need love. They only learn how to endure the lack of it. And that is why the adults they become, resilient, intelligent, sensitive, still find themselves slipping into loneliness without knowing the reason. There is something strange about people who grew up being overlooked. They often live inside a quiet circle where they long to be seen, yet fear it more than anything. You want to be heard, but the moment someone truly pays attention, you step back and pretend you're fine. You want closeness, yet when someone comes too close, you build an invisible distance. You want love, but when love finally appears, you feel uneasy, as if it is a door that can close at any moment. You live inside that contradiction every day. When you feel lonely, you tell yourself you don't need anyone. But when things become too quiet, an emptiness rises in your chest so deep, it almost feels like you could disappear. You try to please people, believing that if you are good enough, gentle enough, easy enough to love, then maybe this time someone will stay. But whenever they don't, you blame yourself. maybe I wasn't enough. And so you walk a circle with no exit, where every attempt to be loved ends in the fear of losing love. Some nights you lie still, staring at the ceiling, feeling your heart tighten in a familiar rhythm. A longing with no direction, a fear with no clear reason. It feels like something inside you has died a long time ago. Not hope, not faith, but the act of waiting, and waiting to be called, and waiting to be seen, and waiting for someone sensitive enough to understand that your silence is also a quiet cry for help. You try to heal by staying busy. You work harder, help others, and become the strong one in every group. But when you return to your room, when the door closes and the world outside fades, only your breathing remains. Short, tight, scattered. You've come to realize that exhaustion has become more familiar to you than peace. Sometimes people ask, "Why are you always so calm?" You smile and say you like silence. But the truth is, silence was never a choice. You simply learned that speaking did not change anything. You didn't choose loneliness. You only learned that being alone hurts less than being forgotten in a crowd. And then, amid all your efforts to hold yourself together, there is a small pause, like the moment you sit alone in the dark and no longer want to fight. You breathe in, breathe out, and the noise inside slowly fades. In that stillness, there is no sadness, no anger, only a heavy quietness settling over your mind. And perhaps that is the moment you finally reach the edge of the loop, the place where you no longer know whether you are seeking connection or simply running from the fear of being forgotten once again. Perhaps what exhausts you the most is not loneliness itself, but the constant effort to pretend you're not lonely. Maybe you've spent your youth proving that you're fine, that you're strong, that you can live well without needing anyone. But beneath all of that, there is still a small part of you, the part that has never truly been heard, quietly calling your name each night. Maybe it's time you stop resisting that voice, because exhaustion is not weakness. Silence is not peace. And the emptiness you feel does not mean something is wrong with you. It simply means that it has been far too long since you last touched something real. Maybe you don't need to earn anyone's attention. You don't need to be better or softer or easier to love. The fact that you exist is already enough to be seen. And maybe what you need right now is not someone to save you, but a moment where you can turn inward and tell yourself, "I'm here, I see you." When your heart stops fighting to be heard, when you no longer push yourself to prove you are worthy, that is not the end. It is the beginning. It is the moment you start hearing your own voice again. It is when the tension between wanting and fearing finally loosens. You realize that the invisibility you felt was never because the world couldn't see you, but because you had forgotten how to look at yourself. Healing doesn't begin when someone else recognizes your worth. It begins in the quiet moment you pause, breathe deeply, and let silence become a companion instead of an enemy. Because in that stillness, you hear something small, but true. You never disappeared. You were simply learning how to return. And maybe exhaustion is not failure. It is honesty. It is the moment you stop pretending everything is fine, and for the first time allow your heart to be safely fragile. Sometimes healing doesn't begin with anything big. It begins with something very small, like the moment you pause in the middle of a long day, take a slow breath, and whisper to yourself, "I've done enough." Just that, and suddenly, you are no longer the child waiting for someone to acknowledge you. You become the one giving yourself the presence you always longed for. You don't need to be strong all the time. You don't need to know exactly where you are going or become the best version of anyone. Sometimes healing is simply sitting still and letting the emotions you once avoided pass through without judgment. It is learning to listen to your own heartbeat, even when it is so faint it feels like nothing more than a breath. There will be days when you feel lost again, when it seems like you are slowly fading. But unlike before, this time you are not afraid. Because now you understand that fading is sometimes just your soul asking to rest. And resting is not giving up, it is your way of returning to yourself. You begin to notice the beauty in small, quiet things. A silent morning, a cup of tea gone cold, sunlight leaking through the curtains. You allow yourself to see and to feel without needing a reason, without needing permission. You look in the mirror and no longer search for perfection. You search for truth. A face that can be tired, eyes that can be heavy, but for the first time, they are not avoiding themselves. And when you learn to be gentle with yourself, the world begins to soften too. You no longer resent others for not seeing you, because you have finally learned how to see yourself. You no longer crave applause or recognition, because you understand your worth has never lived in the eyes of others. It lives in the simple fact that you are here, breathing, feeling, existing. Healing is not forgetting the past. It is accepting that the past happened and that it shaped you into someone who listens deeper, understands more softly, and feels more truthfully. Sometimes the very wounds that once made you hide become the places where the first light enters. And in that breath, slow, honest, warm, something becomes clear. You no longer need anyone to see you, because finally you have learned to see yourself. One day, you will realize that you were never truly abandoned. You simply learned to stand so still that no one could hear you anymore. When you were a child, you believed that if you were good, if you stayed quiet long enough, someone would come back for you. But silence never brings anyone back. It only teaches you how to wait in ways that hurt. And you waited until the waiting itself became part of your breath, part of the way you existed, part of the softness in your eyes that always looked tired even when you smiled. Then one day, nothing extraordinary happens. No one arrives, no one leaves. You just sit there, listening to your own breath, and for the first time, you don't feel lonely. Because you finally understand that in all the years you spent waiting to be loved, you forgot that you could be the one to offer that love to yourself. And when that truth settles, the world does not change instantly, but something inside you softens, lightens, becomes still. You begin to learn how to see again, not looking at others for validation, but looking at yourself as someone worthy of being seen, understood, and cared for. You stop waiting for someone to call your name because you have finally dared to call your own. You stop waiting for someone to return because you have already chosen to stay with yourself. And in that stillness, you understand that abandonment was never the ending. It was a doorway leading you back to the place you were always meant to belong, a place where no one leaves because you have never truly left yourself. In the end, what you needed was never out there. It was in the breath you're holding, in the heartbeat that stayed steady, even in exhaustion, in the faint morning light slipping through your window. It isn't magic, it's a homecoming, a quiet, profound return to a self you no longer push away, a self you force to be unseen. And maybe you were never invisible. You were simply waiting to see yourself. Silence was never emptiness. It was your soul learning how to listen. You were not abandoned. You were becoming whole.